Welcome to Story Tales. Please like this video and subscribe to Story Tales. I hope you enjoy the story. Let's begin. The soft clink of crystal glasses echoed across the restaurant. Julian Hanks observed his wife from across the table, cataloging her movements with quiet precision. At 35, he had the sharp gaze of someone who'd spent his life learning to read people, a skill that had served him well in business and, as it turned out, in his personal life too. To 5 years, Lily said, raising her glass. Her smile never quite reached her eyes. Julian raised his own in response. 5 years. Under the warm restaurant lighting, Lily looked stunning. Her sleek black dress accentuated her figure, and her dark hair cascaded over her shoulders in perfect waves. At 32, Lily, Hanks remained as beautiful as the day they'd met. Her presence commanded attention, her laugh drawing eyes from across the room. Julian could feel the stares of other patrons, their envy at what appeared to be a perfect couple. The waiter approached with their appetizers, placing them with practiced flourish before retreating. The Kingsley deal went through today, Julian said, cutting into the seared scallop on his plate. Lily nodded absently, her attention flitting to her phone beside her plate. That's nice, darling. It's more than nice. It's the biggest acquisition we've made this quarter. Well, then we should celebrate, Lily replied, her eyes briefly meeting his before darting away. Maybe that trip to Bali you've been putting off? Julian studied her face. There had been a time when her suggestions would have seemed genuine, when he believed her interest in his work extended beyond what it afforded them. He still remembered the early days, Lily's excitement as he described his business plans, her encouragement when deals fell through, her pride when they succeeded. I'm still tied up with the transition team, he answered. Maybe in a few months. Disappointment flickered across Lily's features. Not because she would miss spending time with him, Julian realized, but because she'd been denied something she wanted. They ate in companionable silence, maintaining the illusion of marital harmony. On the surface, they were Julian and Lily Hanks, the power couple the self-made entrepreneur who had built his tech consulting firm from nothing. She, the society darling who had grown up in the luxury Julian had only acquired through years of grueling work. Their marriage had once been the subject of admiration among their social circle. The ambitious businessman and the elegant socialite, a perfect match. But Julian knew better now. The cracks had been forming for longer than he cared to admit. As Julian signaled for the check, he caught Lily checking her phone again, her thumb quickly swiping away a notification. Someone important? He asked casually. Lily's hand froze momentarily before she slipped her phone into her purse. Just Emily about the charity gala. You know how she gets with the details. Julian nodded, not pressing further. He'd grown accustomed to these small lies, harmless on their own, but troubling in their accumulation. The drive home was quiet, the radio filling the silence between them. Julian navigated through the city streets, stealing glances at Lily's profile illuminated by passing streetlights. He remembered when he used to reach for her hand during these drives, when the silence between them felt comfortable rather than loaded. Their house, a modern minimalist structure with clean lines and expansive windows, came into view as they turned into their neighborhood. Julian pulled into the driveway, the automatic lights sensing their arrival. I'm going to take a bath, Lily announced as they entered the house, already heading toward the staircase. Julian watched her go, noticing how she clutched her purse containing her phone tightly against her side. I'll be in my office. I have some calls to make. Once alone in his office, Julian sat heavily in his leather chair. He swiveled to face the window, looking out at the manicured garden now shrouded in darkness. The reflection that stared back at him from the glass showed a man who had everything and nothing at all. His thoughts drifted to the beginning, to how he'd met Lily at a business function where he'd been trying to secure investors. She had been the daughter of one of the wealthiest men in the room, yet she'd approached him not the other way around. Her interest had seemed genuine, her admiration for his ambition apparent. Julian had grown up with nothing, clawing his way through college on scholarships and working multiple jobs. Every step of his success had been earned through sheer determination and countless sleepless nights. Lily had been drawn to that drive, or so he'd thought, Their courtship had been swift, intense. Julian remembered being almost dizzy with disbelief that someone like Lily, beautiful, sophisticated, from a world so different from his own, could love him. The wedding had been lavish, more for her family's benefit than his. Julian had gone along with it, wanting to give Lily everything she desired. And for a while it had worked. They had been happy, or what he had interpreted as happiness. But something had shifted. Julian couldn't pinpoint exactly when the change had occurred. Perhaps it had been gradual, like water slowly eroding stone. Lily had become more distant, more focused on the material aspects of their life together. Her spending had increased, her interest in his company diminished except for what it could provide. Julian sighed, turning back to his desk. He opened his laptop, intending to review some contracts, but his mind wandered. The truth was, he had begun to suspect Lily's affections weren't as sincere as they once seemed, if they ever truly had been. The thought cut deeper than he cared to admit. His phone buzzed with a message from Kai. "Drinks tomorrow? Need to talk to you about something." Julian replied with a quick affirmative. If anyone would give him an honest perspective, it would be Kai. His best friend had never been one to sugarcoat the truth, even when it hurt. Upstairs, Julian could hear Lily moving around in their bedroom. Once, he would have joined her, eager to share the end of the day together. Now, he remained in his office, the distance between them measured not just in feet, but in the secrets they kept from each other. The bar hummed with after-work energy professionals unwinding, loosening ties, and shaking off the constraints of corporate decorum. Julian spotted Kai at their usual corner table, already nursing what appeared to be a whiskey on the rocks. "You're late," Kai said as Julian slid into the chair opposite him. At 36, Kai Alden had the commanding presence that served him well as one of the city's top lawyers. His dark suit was impeccably tailored, his expression shrewd as he studied Julian. "Client call ran over," Julian explained, signaling to the waitress for his usual. Kai nodded, taking a sip of his drink. "How's Lily?" Something in his tone caught Julian's attention. "Fine." "Why?" The waitress arrived with Julian's drink, momentarily pausing their conversation. Once she departed, Kai leaned forward, his voice dropping. "Listen, I didn't want to say anything, but as your friend and lawyer, I feel like I should." He swirled the amber liquid in his glass. "There's been talk." Julian stiffened. "What kind of talk?" "About Lily. She's been seen around town, not where she says she is." Kai held up a hand as Julian began to object. "I know it could be nothing, but she was spotted having lunch at Maison with a guy who definitely wasn't you." Julian felt a cold weight settle in his stomach. "She has friends, Kai. Business associates." At a private booth in the back, with her hand on his arm, Kai's expression was sympathetic but unyielding. "Look, it might be innocent, but as your friend, I thought you should know." Julian took a long drink, the alcohol burning a path down his throat. "Who was he?" "I don't know. My paralegal Angela was there with a client. She just mentioned it because she thought it was odd how intimate they seemed." Julian wanted to dismiss it outright. Lily wouldn't do that to him. But a voice in the back of his mind whispered doubts he'd been trying to silence for months. "She's been getting texts late at night," Julian admitted quietly. "Always says it's her friends or her mother." Kai's expression darkened. "And you believe her?" "I want to." Julian stared at his glass. "We've been different lately. But cheating?" He shook his head. "That's a serious accusation." "I'm not accusing," Kai clarified. "I'm just saying there are loose ends that don't add up. The late-night texts. The lunches she doesn't mention. Last week she told you she was shopping with Emily, right?" Julian nodded. "Emily was in my office that day, going over her divorce settlement." The revelation hit Julian like a physical punch to the gut. He remembered that day, clearly Lily coming home with shopping bags, describing a lunch at a new bistro that had just opened. "Maybe there's an explanation," Julian said, but his voice lacked conviction. Kai shrugged. "Maybe. But you're a businessman, Julian. You know when something doesn't add up in a deal. You investigate." They shifted to safer topics after that: sports, politics, an upcoming golf tournament. But Kai's words lingered in Julian's mind, planting a seed of suspicion that took root with surprising speed. That night, as Julian drove home, he found himself hyper-aware of every detail. Lily's car was in the driveway, the lights on in the master bedroom. Normal. expected. Yet somehow, everything felt off kilter, as if he was seeing his life through a distorted lens. He entered the house quietly, hearing Lily's voice from upstairs. She was on the phone, her tone light, punctuated by soft laughter. Julian moved silently up the stairs, stopping just short of their bedroom door, which was partially open. "I know. I can't believe it either," Lily was saying. "He doesn't suspect a thing." "No, he's working late again. Tomorrow works. The usual place?" Julian stepped back, his heart pounding. This wasn't conclusive. She could be talking to anyone about anything. But combined with what Kai had told him, the coincidence seemed too great that he retreated downstairs, settling in his office again. When he heard Lily's footsteps on the stairs 15 minutes later, he pretended to be engrossed in work. "Oh, you're home," she said, sounding surprised. "I didn't hear you come in." Julian looked up, studying her face for signs of deception. "Just got here." "Who are you talking to?" If Lily noticed the direct question, she didn't show it. "Emily. Planning the fundraiser for next month." Another lie. Another piece of the puzzle shifting into place. "Right," Julian said, turning back to his laptop. "I might be up late." "Don't wait up." Lily hesitated in the doorway, as if wanting to say something more, then nodded and left. Julian waited until her footsteps faded before opening a new browser window. If he was going to get to the bottom of this, he needed to be methodical, careful. He needed evidence. That night, after Lily had gone to bed, Julian began his investigation in earnest. He checked their phone records first, noting repeated calls to a number he didn't recognize. Text message logs showed frequent exchanges with the same number, often late at night or when Julian was known to be out of the house. The pattern was becoming clear, but Julian needed more. He wasn't going to confront Lily based on circumstantial evidence. If she was betraying him, he wanted to know beyond any doubt. The next day, Julian called his company's IT director under the guise of security concerns. "I need software that can track messages on a device, even if they're deleted," he explained. "For company phones." The director didn't ask questions, just as Julian knew he wouldn't. By that afternoon, Julian had what he needed: a discrete program that would forward all of Lily's messages to his own device. The IT felt wrong, this invasion of privacy. But the alternative, living in ignorance while his wife potentially made a fool of him, felt worse. "I'm having drinks with the girls tonight," Lily told him that evening, already dressed in an outfit that seemed excessive for a casual get-together. "Don't wait up." Julian nodded, not trusting himself to speak. As soon as the door closed behind her, he activated the tracking program he'd installed on her phone while she was in the shower. Then he waited, watching as his own phone lit up with notifications: Lily's real-time location, not headed toward any of her usual haunts, followed by a series of text messages to the unknown number: "On my way. Can't wait to see you. Jay thinks I'm with Emily." Julian's hand tightened around his phone. The recipient's reply came quickly. "Same here. Got the room already. 1507. A hotel." She was meeting someone at a hotel? Julian felt a cold rage building inside him, a calculating anger that cleared his mind rather than clouding it. He considered his options. He could confront her now, catch her in the act. But something held him back. A deeper plan was forming, one that required patience. Instead of rushing out, Julian poured himself a drink and began to formulate his strategy. If Lily wanted to play games, he would show her exactly who she was dealing with. This wouldn't be a messy, emotional confrontation. It would be methodical, devastating. He opened his laptop and began making notes. This wasn't just about catching her, it was about understanding the full scope of her betrayal. Over the next 2 weeks, Julian observed Lily with detached precision. Each lie she told, each secret meeting she attended, all documented and filed away in a growing dossier of betrayal. He noted patterns in her behavior: the specific outfit changes for her meetings, the strategic application of a particular perfume, the careful way she monitored his schedule to plan her rendezvous. She grew bolder as time went on, less careful about concealing her tracks. Perhaps she mistook his silence for obliviousness. Julian let her believe it, playing the role of the unsuspecting husband while gathering his evidence. The messages continued, explicit and damning. Julian read them with a strange, emotional detachment, as if they concerned strangers rather than his own marriage. It was the only way he could process the depth of Lily's deception without losing his focus. Then came the revelation that turned his cold anger into something harder, more implacable. A message pinged on his phone one evening while he sat alone in his office. Lily, supposedly at a spa weekend with friends. Hell, yes, all day. He never leaves before 6. Plenty of time. R. Your place again? L. Where else? He's too stupid to notice. Besides, there's something delicious about using his bed. Julian stared at the exchange, a new level of rage crystallizing within him. Not only was she cheating, but she was bringing her lover into their home, into their bed. The final vestige of respect he might have maintained for her evaporated. But it was the next message that truly condemned her. R. You sure about the anniversary thing? Seems risky. L. Please. He's planning some big surprise dinner. Probably thinks it'll fix things. I'll go along with it, smile for the photos, then meet you after. We'll have our own celebration. Julian scrolled back through earlier messages, putting together the pieces. Then he saw a name that made his blood freeze. Rowan Lockhart, his brother's best friend. A man who had been in their wedding party, who had dined at their table countless times. The betrayal was complete. Julian set down his phone, his decision made. The anniversary dinner Lily had mentioned was indeed in his calendar a 5-year milestone he had been planning to mark with a private celebration. Now, it would serve a different purpose. He picked up his phone and called Kai. I need your help, Julian said when his friend answered. And I need you to clear your calendar for next Friday evening. Kai didn't hesitate. Whatever you need. The pieces of Julian's plan began to take shape. He made calls, arranged details, set his trap with the same meticulous attention he applied to his business deals. By the end of the week, everything was in place. That on Friday morning, Julian informed Lily that he had changed their anniversary plans. I've reserved the private room at Elysium, he told her over breakfast. I invited a few close friends and family. I thought it would be nice to celebrate with the people who matter most to us. Lily's surprise seemed genuine, quickly masked by apparent delight. That sounds wonderful. Who did you invite? Julian smiled, the expression not reaching his eyes. Just the usual suspects. Kai, your parents, my brother, about 15 people in total. He watched her carefully, noting the micro-expression of concern that flashed across her face. Anyone else? She asked casually. A few surprises, Julian replied. It wouldn't be special without a few surprises. Lily nodded, her fingers tapping restlessly against her coffee mug. Julian could almost see her mind working, calculating risks, planning her response. She excused herself to make a phone call to warn Rowan. No doubt. Julian let her go, his own plans far too advanced to be derailed now. He had one more crucial task before the evening, retrieving the final piece of evidence he needed. He waited until Lily left for her pre-anniversary spa treatment before entering their bedroom and going directly to her closet. Behind the row of designer shoes, exactly where his private investigator had indicated, he found a small safety box. The combination wasn't difficult to crack. Lily had always used the same 4 digits for everything. Inside lay several items. A burner phone different from a regular one, a set of hotel key cards kept as souvenirs, and a manila envelope. Julian opened the envelope and removed its contents: photos of him and Lily, financial statements from his company, and what appeared to be a copy of their prenuptial agreement. But it wasn't their actual prenup. The document had been altered, the terms drastically changed to Lily's advantage. Julian had suspected something like this: a backup plan, insurance for Lily if things went south. What she didn't know was that Julian had anticipated such a move years ago. The real, legally binding prenup was secured in his attorney's vault, with terms that would leave Lily with almost nothing if they divorced. Julian photographed everything, then carefully returned the items exactly as he'd found them. The final piece was in place. All that remained was the dinner itself. Julian stood in their bedroom, looking at the bed where his wife had betrayed him. A sense of finality washed over him. Whatever had existed between them, love, trust, respect, was gone. In its place stood only Julian's determination to end this on his terms. That he checked his watch. 6 hours until dinner. 6 hours until Lily's carefully constructed world of lies came crashing down around her. Julian smiled, a cold expression devoid of warmth. She had no idea what was coming. Elysium glowed with understated elegance. The private dining room transformed into an intimate celebration space. Soft lighting cast a warm glow over the gathered guests, the gentle murmur of conversation filling the air. Julian stood near the entrance, greeting each arrival with practiced ease, a flute of champagne in his hand. He'd chosen every detail with deliberate care, from the specific guests to the strategic seating arrangement. Lily's parents were placed directly across from Julian's brother, while Kai sat at Julian's right hand. The empty chair beside Lily would remain conspicuously vacant throughout the evening. Lily herself was radiant in a fitted red dress, her hair swept up elegantly. She moved through the room with grace, accepting congratulations and compliments with practiced charm. To anyone watching, she appeared the picture of a contented wife celebrating a milestone with her husband. Only Julian noticed the subtle tells the way her gaze frequently darted to the entrance, the slight tension in her shoulders, the barely perceptible check of her phone beneath the table. She was waiting for someone who wouldn't arrive. "Where's Rowan?" Julian's brother asked as they gathered for pre-dinner drinks. "I thought he'd be here." Julian caught Lily's minute flinch at the name. "Last-minute work emergency, apparently," he replied smoothly. "Maybe he'll join us for dessert." Lily's relief was visible only to Julian, who had become an expert in reading her deceptions. She didn't know that Rowan had received a very different invitation along with select pieces of evidence that had prompted him to flee the city entirely just hours before. The dinner progressed with choreographed precision. Julian engaged effortlessly with their guests, discussing business ventures and shared memories, while Lily grew increasingly relaxed as the evening wore on. By the time the main course was cleared, she had convinced herself that the evening was exactly what it appeared to be: a simple anniversary celebration. Julian waited until the servers had poured champagne for the traditional toasts before making his move. He stood, raising his glass, commanding the room's attention with natural authority. "Before we begin the toasts, I'd like to thank everyone for joining us tonight," he began, his voice strong and clear. "5 years ago, I married a woman I believed was my partner in every sense of the word." Approving murmurs rippled through the gathering. Lily smiled up at him, her expression smug beneath its veneer of affection. "In that time," Julian continued, "I've learned a great deal about partnership, loyalty, and truth." He paused, his gaze settling on Lily. "And deception." A subtle shift occurred in the room, a barely perceptible change in atmosphere as guests sensed the unexpected turn. Lily's smile faltered, uncertainty flickering in her eyes. "I've always believed that anniversaries should be marked with gifts that reflect the nature of the relationship," Julian went on, his tone conversational. "Something symbolic of what we truly mean to each other." He reached beside his chair, producing a leather portfolio that he set on the table before him. "My gift to you, Lily," he said, sliding the folder across to her, "is the truth." Lily's hands trembled slightly as she reached for the portfolio, more confused than alarmed. She still believed she could control the situation, still thought she held the upper hand. "What's this?" she asked, attempting a light laugh that fell flat in the suddenly silent room. "Open it," Julian instructed, his voice cool and detached. Lily complied, her expression shifting from puzzlement to dawning horror as she realized what she was seeing: printouts of her messages with Rowan, photographs of them entering hotels, financial records showing unexplained transfers from Julian's accounts to an offshore holding sheet established. "I don't understand," she stammered, quickly closing the folder. "Julian, what is this?" "I think you understand perfectly," Julian replied. He turned to address their guests, who watched with varying degrees of confusion and discomfort. "Lily and I have had an arrangement for some time now. She pretends to be a devoted wife while sleeping with my brother's best friend and planning to divorce me once she's secure enough of my assets." Gasps and murmurs erupted around the table. Lily's parents exchanged alarmed glances while Julian's brother stared at Lily with undisguised disgust. "Julian, please," Lily hissed, her face flushed with anger and embarrassment. This isn't the place. Actually, it's exactly the place. Julian cut her off. Among friends and family who deserve to know exactly who they've been celebrating. You've been careless, Lily. Leaving evidence, speaking too freely. Did you really think I wouldn't notice? Lily straightened in her chair, shifting tactics. Her embarrassment transformed into cold defiance as she realized she'd been caught. Fine, she said, her voice carrying across the stunned silence. Yes, Rowan and I have been seeing each other. You were never home anyway, always working, always putting your precious company first. Julian smiled, unperturbed by her attempt to shift blame. And the altered prenup in your closet safe? The offshore accounts? Were those also because I worked too much? Lily's face blanched. She hadn't expected him to know about those. You've been planning this for months, Julian continued relentlessly. Maybe years. But here's what you failed to understand. He raised his glass in a mocking toast. You were never playing the game. You were being played. In that moment, Lily seemed to gather herself, a calculating gleam entering her eyes. She raised her own glass, a brittle smile forming on her lips. 5 years wasted on a gold-digging nobody, she said loudly, attempting to reclaim control through sheer audacity. The biggest mistake of my life. The guests reacted with shock, several rising from their seats. But Julian merely nodded, as if she'd confirmed something for him. Funny you should phrase it that way, he said, sliding another folder across the table. Because this fake prenup you've been counting on means you get nothing. Lily's hand froze midway to the folder. What are you talking about? We signed the agreement before the wedding. My lawyer. Your lawyer received a different document than the one filed with the court, Julian explained calmly. A precaution I took when I noticed certain inconsistencies in the draft revisions. The legally binding version protects my assets completely in the case of infidelity. As Lily processed this information, Julian removed his phone from his pocket, tapped the screen once, and set it down on the table. Around the room, phones began to chime and vibrate with incoming messages. What did you do? Lily demanded, the color draining from her face. I just forwarded your text exchanges with Rowan to everyone in this room, Julian replied. The ones where you mock me, where you plan meetings in our home, where you discuss how to best position yourself for a profitable divorce. Lily's parents were the first to check their phones, their expressions shifting from confusion to horrified understanding. Her father wouldn't meet her eyes. Her mother's hand covered her mouth in shock. You can't do this, Lily whispered, panic rising in her voice. I already have, Julian answered simply. I've done exactly what you never expected me to do, fought back. The room had descended into chaos, hushed conversations, shocked exclamations, the scrape of chairs as some guests retreated to process what they were witnessing. Lily sat frozen, her carefully crafted persona crumbling before the assembled witnesses of her deception. Julian remained calm, oddly detached from the emotional turbulence swirling around him. He had anticipated this moment for weeks, had prepared himself for every possible reaction. Lily's humiliation provided him no joy, only a grim sense of justice being served. You've ruined me, Lily finally said, her voice barely audible above the murmurs filling the room. No, Julian corrected her. You did that yourself. I'm merely bringing it to light. Lily's eyes narrowed, desperation giving way to fury. You think this is over? You think you've won? She laughed, a harsh, brittle sound. I'll fight you for everything you have. By the time my lawyers are finished. Your lawyers won't touch this case. Julian interrupted, checking his watch. Not once they see the evidence I've compiled. Speaking of which, on cue, the private dining room's door opened. Kai stood, straightening his tie, and moved to greet the 3 professionals who entered, 2 men and a woman, all carrying leather briefcases. Perfect timing, Julian said. Everyone, please meet Kai's legal team. They prepared some paperwork that requires immediate attention. Lily stared at the newcomers, comprehension dawning in her eyes. Divorce papers? You brought divorce papers to our anniversary dinner. Efficient, isn't it? Julian replied. No need for drawn-out proceedings or prolonged negotiations. The terms are quite straightforward, given the circumstances. Kai approached the table, setting a document portfolio before Lily. All standard, he explained clinically. Julian retains all assets acquired before and during the marriage. You receive a one-time settlement of $50,000, contingent upon your signature tonight, and a binding non-disclosure agreement. Lily flipped through the pages, her hands shaking. This is ridiculous. I won't sign this. I'm entitled to half. You're entitled to nothing, Julian cut in. The prenup is clear. In case of infidelity, which has been thoroughly documented, you forfeit all claims to marital assets. The $50,000 is a courtesy Julian is extending despite having no legal obligation to do so. The legal team had positioned themselves strategically around the room, their presence adding an unmistakable weight to the proceedings. One of them produced a pen, placing it beside the documents with quiet finality. Lily looked around the room, seeking an ally among the assembled guests. Her eyes landed on her father, a successful businessman himself. Dad, you can't let them do this. Call Raymond. He'll stop this nonsense. Her father's expression was pained. Raymond won't help Lily. Not with this. He gestured toward his phone, where her messages with Rowan remained open. You brought this on yourself. Abandoned by her final potential supporter, Lily turned back to Julian, her expression hardening. I'm not signing anything tonight. I need time, consultation with my own attorneys. Of course, Julian agreed reasonably. That's your right. But before you decide, you should know that declining to sign tonight doesn't just mean you lose the settlement offer. He nodded to Kai, who withdrew another document from his briefcase. This, Julian explained, is a press release detailing your affair, the financial improprieties we've uncovered, and your attempt to defraud me through an altered legal document. It goes to every major news outlet in the morning unless those papers are signed. Lily blanched. You wouldn't dare. Your own reputation would survive. Julian finished for her. A wronged husband exposing his unfaithful wife. The public loves a story of betrayal and justice. Your reputation, on the other hand, the implication hung in the air. In their social circle, among the elite business community where a family held influence, such a scandal would be devastating. Lily would become a pariah, her family name tarnished by association. This is blackmail, she whispered. Julian shook his head. This is consequence, something you apparently thought you'd never face. Lily glanced at the legal team, then at the guests still present witnesses to her humiliation. Her options were rapidly dwindling. With trembling fingers, she reached for the pen. Before you sign, Julian said, his voice dropping to ensure only she could hear, know that this is your last chance to walk away with anything. Once that pen touches paper, there's no going back. Lily's hand hesitated above the document. You'll still be alone, she said, a final attempt to wound him. When all this is over, when everyone has gone home, you'll still be alone. Julian held her gaze unmoved. I was already alone. The difference is now I'll be free of lies. With that, Lily's resistance crumbled. She signed her name on each marked line, each stroke of the pen dismantling the life she had constructed. When she finished, Kai collected the documents, confirming each signature before nodding to Julian. It's done, he said simply. Julian stood, addressing the remaining guests. Thank you all for coming. I apologize for the unexpected turn of events. Please enjoy the rest of your evening. He turned to Lily, his expression impassive. You should call a car. I'll have your things packed and sent to wherever you're staying. As Julian moved to leave the private dining room, Kai at his side, Lily called after him, desperation cracking her voice. Julian, you can't just leave me here like this. Julian paused in the doorway, not bothering to turn around. Actually, I can, and I am. With that, he walked out, closing the door firmly behind him. In the restaurant's main area, Kai placed a steadying hand on Julian's shoulder. You okay? Julian considered the question. The anger that had fueled him for weeks had subsided, leaving in its wake a strange emptiness. Not grief, not quite relief, something unnameable between the two. I will be, he answered finally. Kai nodded, understanding without further explanation. The paperwork is solid. She won't be able to contest it. Not with the evidence, and not after signing tonight. Good, Julian said. Have your team finish up here. I need some air. Outside, the night air was cool against Julian's face. He loosened his tie, breathing deeply as the adrenaline of confrontation slowly ebbed from his system. Through the restaurant's windows, he could see the aftermath of his carefully orchestrated revelation, Lily sitting alone at the table, abandoned by the guests who had come to celebrate a marriage that no longer existed. Julian felt no satisfaction in her isolation, no pleasure in her humiliation. He had simply done what was necessary to extricate himself from a relationship built on deception. The coldness of his methods matched the coldness with which Lily had betrayed him. His phone vibrated with a message from Kai. Papers filed with overnight service. It's over. Julian slipped the phone back into his pocket without replying. The legal battle might be concluded, but something told him Lily wouldn't surrender so easily. She had too much pride, too much to lose that he got in his car, not yet ready to return to the house that no longer felt like home. As he drove through the city streets, Julian realized he had prepared for every contingency except one. What came next? The future stretched before him, suddenly unmarked and uncertain. For now, it was enough that he had reclaimed control of his life. The rest would come in time. Julian had anticipated Lily's next move with the same precision he'd applied to every aspect of his plan. Even as the private dining room at Elysium continued to empty of shocked guests, Lily had pulled herself together enough to reach for her phone, her fingers flying across the screen with frantic energy. Secluded in a quiet alcove near the restaurant's entrance, Julian observed her through the partially open door. Kai approached, 2 glasses in hand, offering one to Julian. She's calling him, Julian noted, accepting the drink. Kai didn't need to ask who. Think he'll answer? No. Julian took a measured sip. Rowan received his own set of documents this morning, along with evidence that Lily had been funneling company information to a competitor through him. Kai's eyebrows rose. Was she? No, but the fabricated evidence was convincing enough to send him running. Self-preservation is a powerful motivator. Inside the private room, Lily's expression shifted from desperate hope to confusion, then anger as her call went unanswered. She tried again, with the same result. She's trying to salvage what she can, Julian observed dispassionately. Looking for an ally, someone to help her counterattack. She won't find one, Kai assured him. Everyone who matters was in that room, saw the evidence. Your brother's already called me to offer support. Her own parents can barely look at her. Julian nodded, watching as Lily finally set down her phone, frustration evident in every line of her body. She gathered her purse and the folder of evidence Julian had presented, squaring her shoulders with forced dignity. Here she comes, Julian murmured, stepping back into the shadows of the alcove. Lily emerged from the private room, her face a mask of composure betrayed only by the redness rimming her eyes. She moved through the main restaurant with her head high, ignoring the curious glances from other diners who had sensed some disruption in the private event. As she neared the exit, Lily spotted Julian and Kai in their secluded corner. She hesitated only briefly before approaching, her gaze fixed on Julian with burning intensity. Enjoying yourself? She asked, her voice low and controlled despite the emotion churning beneath the surface. Julian met her gaze evenly. This was never about enjoyment, Lily. No. Then what was it about? Humiliation? Revenge? Justice? Julian replied simply. Consequences for choices freely made. Lily laughed, a brittle sound devoid of humor. You talk about consequences while engineering this entire spectacle. You're no victim, Julian. You're a calculator disguised as a man. A quality you once admired, Julian noted, when it served your purposes. Something flickered in Lily's eyes, a momentary glimpse of the vulnerability behind her defensive anger. This isn't over, she said, her voice barely above a whisper. You think you've stripped me of everything, but you've overlooked something crucial. And what might that be? Julian asked, genuinely curious about what threat she believed she still held. Lily smiled, a cold expression that didn't reach her eyes. You still care, she said. Despite everything, Some part of you still cares what happens to me. That's your weakness, Julian. That's what I'll use. Julian studied her face, searching for the woman he had once loved amid the calculating stranger before him. You're mistaken, he said finally. What I care about is closure, which I now have. Lily's composure slipped, just for an instant, revealing the desperation beneath. The papers, she said abruptly. I want to change them. 50,000 isn't enough for what you've put me through. Kai stepped forward, his professional demeanor firmly in place. The agreement has been signed and witnessed. Any attempt to contest, it would trigger the release of all evidence Julian has compiled. Evidence he fabricated, Lily countered. Your text messages? The hotel records? The altered prenup in your own handwriting? Kai shook his head. None of that was fabricated, Lily, as you well know. Lily turned her attention back to Julian, changing tactics. I loved you once, she said, her voice softening. Before the company took over your life, before you stopped seeing me as a person and started seeing me as an accessory. We could have had something real if you tried. The accusation might once have landed with devastating impact, might have sparked guilt or self-doubt in Julian. Now, it merely confirmed the rightness of his actions. If that were true, he replied, you would have left. Not cheated, not schemed, not planned to take half of everything I've built. You chose deception because it served your interests. Now you're facing the outcome of that choice. Lily's facade cracked further, anger bleeding through. At least Rowan saw me as a woman, not just as the perfect corporate wife. Rowan saw you as a means to an end, Julian corrected her. Ask yourself why he isn't answering your calls now that you've lost your value to him. The truth of this statement hit Lily visibly, her shoulders sagging slightly before she caught herself. Her phone buzzed in her hand, and she glanced down at it, hope flaring briefly before dying in her eyes. Whatever message she'd received, it wasn't the rescue she'd been hoping for. Sign the papers, Julian advised quietly. Take the settlement. Start over somewhere new. That's the best option you have left. For a moment, something like genuine pain crossed Lily's features, not for the loss of her marriage or the exposure of her schemes, but for the failure of her grand design. She had gambled everything on her ability to manipulate Julian, and she had lost. I'll destroy you, she said, but the threat sounded hollow even to her own ears. One day, when you least expect it, I'll find a way to make you pay for this night. Julian shook his head, not in denial, but in recognition of the futility of her words. Goodbye, Lily, he said simply, turning away to signal the end of their conversation. Lily stood frozen for a moment, as if unable to believe this final dismissal. Then, with a sharp intake of breath, she spun on her heel and stalked toward the exit, her rigid posture a last attempt at dignity. As the door closed behind her, Kai turned to Julian. You think she'll try something? Julian considered the question carefully. She'll want to, but her options are limited. The settlement funds won't be released until the non-disclosure agreement is in effect. If she violates it, she loses even that. What about Rowan? Could they join forces? Unlikely, Julian replied. The evidence I sent him suggests Lily was setting him up as a scapegoat. He won't risk further involvement. Kai nodded, satisfied with the assessment. So it's really over. Julian finished his drink, setting the empty glass on a nearby table. The marriage is over. The divorce will be finalized within weeks. But Lily's anger, he glanced toward the door through which she had departed. That may take longer to dissipate. You're not worried? Julian considered this. Cautious, he corrected. I didn't spend weeks planning tonight, just to be careless afterward. He checked his watch. The mover should be at the house by now. I'd like to be there when she arrives. Kai raised an eyebrow. You going back to the house tonight? Is that wise? It's necessary, Julian replied. This needs to be finished cleanly, completely. No loose ends. As they walked to their cars, Julian found himself strangely calm. The confrontation that had consumed his thoughts for weeks was now behind him. What remained was the methodical process of disentanglement from Lily, from the life they had shared, from the illusions he had maintained about their marriage. The night air felt cleansing, promising a future unburdened by deception. Whatever came next, Julian would face it with clear eyes and a resolve strengthened by fire. The house was a flurry of activity when Julian arrived. Professional movers efficiently packed Lily's belongings under the supervision of an inventory specialist Kai had arranged. Every item was being documented, photographed, and carefully boxed, creating an unassailable record to counter any future claims of theft or damage. Julian moved through the controlled chaos with detached interest, occasionally directing the team regarding specific items. The wedding photos, the artwork they had selected together, the furnishings that held memories both genuine and tainted, all categorized and decided upon with businesslike efficiency. Mr. Hanks, the inventory specialist, approached, tablet in hand. We've completed the master bedroom and office. Should we proceed with the guest rooms? Julian nodded. Everything except my personal office is to be cataloged. Anything clearly belonging to Mrs. Hanks should be packed for delivery to. He paused, realizing he didn't know where Lily would go. We have instructions to store the items securely until Mrs. Hanks provides a delivery address. The specialist filled in smoothly. Of course, Kai would have thought of that detail. Julian made a mental note to thank his friend for his thoroughness. The sound of tires on the driveway alerted Julian to Lily's arrival. He moved to the entryway, positioning himself where he would be the first person she saw upon entering. The front door flew open with more force than necessary, Lily storming in with the reckless energy of someone running on pure adrenaline and fury. She stopped short at the sight of Julian, standing calmly amid the packing activity. "What is this?" she demanded, gesturing wildly at the movers working efficiently around them. "The logical next step," Julian replied evenly. "Your belongings are being packed and will be stored until you provide a delivery address." Lily stared at him, momentarily speechless with rage. "You're throwing me out? Tonight. The divorce agreement you signed includes immediate vacation of the marital home," Julian explained, "as discussed and agreed upon in writing less than 2 hours ago." Lily's gaze darted around the entrance hall, taking in the systematic dismantling of her life here. "I need time," she protested. "I need to sort through my things, decide what. Everything is being inventoried." Julian cut her off. "You'll receive a complete list and can direct the storage company regarding disposal or delivery of each item." "This is insane," Lily said, her voice rising. "You can't just erase 5 years of marriage in a single night." Julian regarded her with calm detachment. "You erased it long before tonight, Lily. Every time you lied. Every time you brought another man into our home." The accusation seemed to focus Lily's scattered thoughts. She straightened, pulling her phone from her purse with newfound determination. "Fine. I'll call Rowan. He'll help me sort this out." Julian did not attempt to stop her, merely watched as she dialed with trembling fingers. The call connected, ringing several times before going to voicemail. "Rowan, it's me," Lily said, her voice tight with controlled emotion. "Julian's gone completely off the deep end. He's having me moved out tonight. I need your help. Call me back immediately." She ended the call, avoiding Julian's gaze as she tried again with the same result. After the third attempt, she lowered the phone, uncertainty creeping across her features. "He's not coming to your rescue," Julian said quietly. "He received a rather concerning package this morning, evidence suggesting you were using him to gather confidential information about my company. False evidence, of course, but compelling enough to send him running." Lily's expression shifted from confusion to dawning horror. "You frame me for corporate espionage? Are you insane?" "I merely created a scenario that appealed to Rowan's sense of self-preservation," Julian corrected. "He was never going to stand by you anyway, Lily. Men like him don't risk their own comfort for anyone." Lily's phone buzzed with an incoming message. Her face fell as she read it, color draining from her cheeks. "What does he say?" Julian asked. Though he could guess the content from her reaction, Lily's voice was hollow when she answered. "You're on your own." She looked up, vulnerability briefly replacing anger. "He doesn't even ask if it's true." "Because it doesn't matter to him," Julian pointed out. "What matters is that you're no longer useful. No access to money, no access to information, no access to me. You've lost your value." The cruelty of the assessment was not lost on either of them. but it contained a truth Lily couldn't refute. She had chosen Rowan partly for his practicality, his willingness to engage in her schemes. That same quality now ensured his swift abandonment when circumstances changed. Fury replaced shock as Lily processed the magnitude of her situation. "You think you won?" she spat, advancing on Julian with reckless anger. "You'll regret this. I'll make sure everyone knows exactly what kind of man you really are: calculating, cold, incapable of real emotion." Julian remained unmoved. "The non-disclosure agreement you signed indicates otherwise. Any attempt to damage my reputation results in immediate forfeiture of the settlement." "I don't care about your money," Lily cried, though the tremor in her voice suggested otherwise. "Then what do you care about, Lily?" Julian asked, genuine curiosity underlying the question. What was any of this for, if not financial gain? The question seemed to catch her off guard. For a moment, the mask of anger slipped, revealing a glimpse of something more complex: hurt, perhaps, or a longing Julian couldn't quite identify. "You never saw me," she said finally, her voice lower. "Not really. I was just another acquisition, another box checked on your perfect life plan." Julian considered this, searching his own memories of their relationship. Had there been truth to her accusation? Perhaps, in the early days of building his company, he had been less present than he should have been. But it didn't explain or excuse the calculated betrayal she had planned. "If that were true," he replied, "you could have left, asked for a divorce, started over honestly." He shook his head. "Instead, you chose deception because it offered greater reward for less effort." Lily flinched, the accuracy of his assessment striking home. She rallied quickly, her features hardening into renewed defiance. "You think I'm the only one who's been calculating? You planned all of this: the dinner, the evidence, the legal team waiting in the wings. You're no better than I am." "I didn't start this," Julian reminded her. "I merely finished it." Lily laughed, a brittle sound edged with desperation. "You think this is finished? You have no idea what I'm capable of." Julian's expression remained impassive. "Actually, I do, which is why there will be a security team monitoring this property starting tomorrow. Any attempt to return uninvited will result in immediate police involvement." The methodical dismantling of her options seemed to fuel Lily's rage rather than diminishing it. She stepped closer, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. "I don't need to come back here to make you pay, Julian. There are other ways to hurt someone." The threat hung between them, its vagueness more concerning than a specific plan might have been. Julian recognized the danger in Lily's desperation. Cornered adversaries were often the most unpredictable. "Be very careful about your next moves," he warned quietly. "Your settlement depends not just on discretion, but on legal compliance with all aspects of the agreement." Lily's laugh held an edge of hysteria. "My settlement? What about my life? Where am I supposed to go tonight?" "The Waldorf has a suite reserve in your name through the end of the month," Julian informed her. "Paid in advance. After that, the choice is yours." The practical information seemed to momentarily deflate Lily's anger, reality intruding on the emotional storm. She glanced around at the activity, continuing around the movers carefully wrapping items, boxes being sealed and labeled. "I need some of my things tonight," she said, her voice smaller now. Julian nodded to the inventory specialist, who approached with her tablet. "We've prepared an overnight bag with essentials," the woman explained professionally. "If there's anything specific you'd like added, we can arrange that." Lily looked between the specialist and Julian, the fight visibly draining from her. The finality of a situation was sinking in. Her marriage was over, her plans in ruins, her ally gone, her future suddenly uncertain. "My jewelry," she said after a moment. "The blue case in my vanity drawer." The specialist made a note and dispatched one of her team to retrieve the item. Julian watched the exchange with a strange sense of disconnection, as if observing strangers rather than participating in the dissolution of his own marriage. "Is there anything else you need immediately?" he asked when the specialist had stepped away. Lily really looked at him, perhaps for the first time that evening. "Why aren't you angrier?" she asked suddenly. "Why this clinical approach? I hurt you. I betrayed you. Shouldn't you be shouting, breaking things?" Julian considered the question seriously. Would that change anything? He asked. Would emotional displays undo what's been done or alter what must happen next? It would be human, Lily retorted. It would be wasteful, Julian countered. Anger clouds judgment. I needed clarity to handle this properly. Lily shook her head, a bitter smile tugging at her lips. Always the businessman, never the husband. Maybe that's where we went wrong from the start. Julian didn't respond to the accusation. The time for post-mortems on their relationship had passed. What remained now was the practical process of separation, the disentanglement of lives once intertwined. The specialist returned with a small blue jewelry case, which Lily accepted with trembling hands. She clutched it to her chest like a talisman, the last remnant of security in her rapidly changing world. Your car is here, Mrs. Hanks, one of the movers announced from the doorway. Lily looked toward the entrance, then back at Julian. The moment stretched between them 5 years of marriage distilled to this final, awkward farewell in a house being systematically emptied of shared history. I did love you, she said finally, the words carrying a weight of sincerity that had been absent from her earlier protestations. At the beginning, Julian nodded once, acknowledging her statement without reciprocating it. Good luck, Lily, he said simply. She hesitated, perhaps waiting for more recriminations or regrets or a last-minute softening. When none came, she squared her shoulders and moved toward the door, pausing with her hand on the handle. You'll still be alone, she said, echoing her earlier taunt from the restaurant, though the words lacked their former venom. I'll be fine, Julian replied, his tone final. Lily held his gaze for a moment longer, then turned and walked out, the door closing behind her with quiet finality. Julian stood in the entryway, listening to the sound of the car pulling away. The house continued its transformation around him, spaces once filled with Lily's presence being methodically emptied, returning to neutral territory, neither wholly his nor reminiscent of her. He moved to his office, the one room untouched by the evening's activities. There, surrounded by the familiar trappings of his work, Julian poured himself a drink and sat behind his desk. The adrenaline that had carried him through the confrontation began to ebb, leaving in its wake not satisfaction or triumph, but a strange, hollow quiet. He had won, yes. But victory, he was discovering, could be a lonely companion. The Waldorf's luxury suite did little to soothe Lily's humiliation and rage. She paced the elegant space like a caged animal, her mind racing through scenarios, searching for leverage, for escape, for revenge. The champagne from the minibar, her third glass, did nothing to dull the sharp edges of her new reality. She had underestimated Julian. Catastrophically. While she'd been planning her exit strategy, he had been 10 steps ahead, dismantling her plans before she could execute them. The thoroughness of his counterattack left her reeling, struggling to identify a single advantage she still held. Her phone rang her parents. Lily hesitated before answering, steeling herself for the conversation. Lily. Her father's voice was cool, controlled. We need to discuss what happened tonight. Daddy, she began, injecting a tremor into her voice. Julian has lost his mind. He's making up these horrible accusations. Stop. The single word cut through her performance. We saw the messages, Lily. We read your own words. Do not insult us by continuing to lie. Lily abandoned the pretense, anger replacing artifice. Fine. Yes, I was seeing someone else. Julian was never home anyway, too busy with his precious company to pay attention to his wife. And the prenuptial agreement you attempted to alter? The financial accounts you established without his knowledge? Were those also because he worked too much? Her father's tone held the sharp disappointment that had always cut deeper than any shouting. I was protecting myself, Lily defended, ensuring I wouldn't be left with nothing if things went south. By committing fraud. It wasn't a question. Her father sighed heavily. Your mother and I raised you better than this, Lily. We gave you every advantage, every opportunity, and you've chosen to behave in a manner that brings shame to yourself and this family. The words stung more than Lily had expected. Despite everything, her parents' approval still mattered. So you're taking a side? Your own daughter isn't worth defending. This isn't about sides, her father replied evenly. This is about accountability for your choices. Julian has evidence of actions that could result in criminal charges, not just divorce proceedings. He's shown restraint by handling this privately. Restraint. Lily laughed bitterly. He humiliated me in front of everyone we know. He's thrown me out of my home with nothing but a suitcase. The home he paid for, her father reminded her. As for humiliation, perhaps you should consider how your actions might have humiliated him. Bringing another man into his house. Mocking him in messages to your lover? What did you expect would happen when he discovered the truth? Lily had no answer that wouldn't further indict her. She changed tactics. I need to stay with you and Mom for a while, just until I figure things out. The silence that followed was answer enough, but her father verbalized it anyway. That won't be possible, Lily. Your mother and I are leaving for Europe tomorrow for 3 months. The house will be closed up. You're going to Europe now? In the middle of all this? Lily couldn't keep the shock from her voice. The trip was planned months ago, her father explained, though something in his tone suggested the timing might be more than coincidental. Beyond that, I think it's best if you handle the situation independently. You created these circumstances. You need to find your own way forward. You're abandoning me, Lily accused, panic edging into her voice. When I need you most, we're allowing you to experience the consequences of your choices, her father corrected. Something we perhaps should have done more often in your upbringing. So that's it. You're cutting me off. Another weighty silence. For now, yes. The settlement Julian has offered is more than fair given the circumstances. It should provide you with enough to establish yourself independently while you consider your next steps. $50,000. Lily's voice rose incredulously. That's nothing in this city. It won't last 3 months. Then perhaps you should consider relocating somewhere more affordable, her father suggested practically. Or securing employment. Your degree in marketing should be useful, even after your extended absence from the workforce. Lily couldn't believe what she was hearing. Her parents had always been her safety net, her last resort. Their withdrawal of support left her truly alone for perhaps the first time in her adult life. I'll fix this, she said finally, desperation giving way to determination. I'll find a way to make Julian pay, to get what I deserve from this marriage. Lily, her father's voice took on a warning tone. Whatever you're thinking, stop. Julian has been methodical and thorough. Any attempt at retaliation will only worsen your position. You don't know what I'm capable of, Lily snapped, echoing her earlier threat to Julian. Perhaps not, her father conceded, but I know what Julian is capable of. He built a multi-million-dollar company from nothing. He outmaneuvered you at every turn in this divorce. Do not make yourself his enemy more than you already have. The advice, sound though it might be, only fueled Lily's anger. She ended the call abruptly, throwing her phone onto the plush hotel bed with a muffled scream of frustration. The suite suddenly felt oppressive despite its luxury. Lily grabbed her purse and room key, needing air, movement, some sense of control over her circumstances. In the elevator down to the lobby, she tried to formulate a plan, some way to reclaim what she had lost. She still had her platinum card, linked to their joint account. She would shop tomorrow, withdraw cash, secure what she could before Julian inevitably froze the accounts. She could sell her jewelry for additional funds. Surely some of her friends would help, offer temporary housing, connections to legal counsel who might find loopholes in the agreement she'd signed. The elevator doors opened onto the opulent lobby. Lily moved through it with practiced confidence, nodding to the concierge as she passed. Outside, the night air was cool against her flushed skin. She instructed the doorman to hail a cab, deciding impulsively to visit a friend who lived nearby, someone who might offer sympathy and practical support. As she waited, Lily reached into her purse for her wallet, intending to check how much cash she had on hand. Her fingers found nothing. Confused, she opened her purse wider, searching more thoroughly. The wallet was definitely missing. "Is everything all right, madam?" the doorman inquired, noting her increasingly frantic movements. "My wallet," Lily explained, embarrassment coloring her cheeks. "I must have left it in my room. Shall I cancel the taxi, then?" Lily nodded, returning to the lobby with as much dignity as she could muster. At the front desk, She explained her situation to the clerk. Not to worry, Mrs. Hanks, the young man assured her. The suite is prepaid, including room service and amenities. If you need cash, we can add it to the room charge. Thank you, Lily replied, relieved at this small mercy. Could you add $500, please? The clerk tapped at his computer, then frowned slightly. I'm sorry, Mrs. Hanks. It seems there's a note on your reservation regarding cash advances. What kind of note? Lily asked, though she already suspected the answer. The suite is fully paid, including meals and services, but cash advances are not authorized. I apologize for the inconvenience. Of course, Julian had thought of this too, ensuring she had shelter and basic needs met, but not the means to act independently beyond the hotel's walls. The realization of how thoroughly he had contained her sent a chill down Lily's spine. I see. Thank you anyway. She retreated to the elevators, her earlier confidence evaporating. Back in the suite, Lily retrieved her phone with shaking hands. She needed to check her financial situation, assess what resources remained available to her. She logged into their joint account first, only to find access denied. A call to the bank's 24-hour service line confirmed her fears her authorization on the account had been revoked hours earlier. Her personal account, where her allowance was normally deposited monthly, showed the expected balance just under $2,000. Not nothing, but far from a security she was accustomed to. Her credit cards were next. One by one, she checked them online or by phone, finding each had been frozen or canceled. The systematic removal of her financial resources left Lily breathless with panic. Julian had not just ended their marriage, he had effectively erased her ability to function independently in the world they had inhabited together. A notification chimed on her phone and email from an unfamiliar address. The subject line read simply, "House sold." Lily opened it with mounting dread. The message contained only a PDF attachment, a sale agreement for their home, dated 2 weeks earlier. Julian had sold the house before the divorce, before the confrontation, before she had any inkling of his plans. The deed had been solely in his name. She remembered now. Another detail she had overlooked in her complacency. The final blow came in the form of a text message from her closest friend. I can't believe what you did to Julian. Don't contact me again. Similar messages followed from other friends, each expressing shock, disapproval, distance. The group that had formed her social circle, her support system, was collectively withdrawing, closing ranks around Julian rather than her. Lily sank onto the edge of the bed, the full weight of her situation crashing down upon her. Julian had not just divorced her, he had systematically dismantled her entire life. Home, money, friends, family support all gone in a single, meticulously planned evening. For the first time, Lily faced the reality that she had truly lost. Not just the battle, but the war. Julian had outplayed her at every turn, anticipating and countering her moves before she made them. The prenup she had thought would protect her financial interests had been a fake. The affair she had thought was secret had been thoroughly documented. The support she had counted on had evaporated. She was alone, truly alone, with nothing but a hotel room paid for by the husband she had betrayed, a suitcase of personal items, and the dawning understanding that her actions had led directly to this moment of reckoning. Lily curled onto the bed, her body shaking with sobs that were equal parts rage and fear. The control she had thought she possessed, the power she had wielded so confidently, had been illusion, smoke, and mirrors that Julian had swept away with terrifying efficiency. Tomorrow would require decisions, plans, a way forward from the ashes of the life she had lost. But tonight, in the anonymous luxury of a hotel suite she hadn't earned, Lily confronted the consequences of her choices with no one to blame but herself. The moving team departed shortly before midnight, leaving Julian alone in a house that felt both emptier and somehow cleaner than it had in years. He walked through the rooms, noting the spaces where Lily's possessions had been, the walls where her chosen artwork had hung. The removal of her presence was physical, tangible, a visible representation of the excision he had performed on his life. His phone buzzed with a message from Kai. All accounts transferred. Cards canceled. House sale paperwork filed. You're officially disentangled, Julian sent back a simple thank you before setting his phone aside. The technical aspects of the separation were complete. What remained was personal, the internal adjustment to a life suddenly stripped of its familiar shape. He wasn't sad. Exactly. The marriage had been dying for longer than he cared to admit. What he felt was something closer to relief, tinged with a weariness that went bone deep. The constant vigilance of recent weeks, the performance of normalcy while gathering evidence, the calculated planning of tonight's confrontation all had exacted a toll he was only now beginning to feel. The doorbell rang, startling Julian from his thoughts. Few people knew the security code to access the property's gate. He moved to the entryway, checking the security monitor before opening the door. Kai stood on the porch, a bottle in one hand and 2 glasses in the other. "Thought you might need company," he said simply. Julian stepped back, allowing his friend to enter. The legal team, finished already, filed everything electronically. Kai confirmed, moving toward the living room. "Expedited processing. By this time next week, you'll be officially single." They settled in the living room, Kai pouring generous measures of what proved to be 18-year-old scotch. He handed a glass to Julian. "No toast," he said. "Just drink." Julian complied, the liquor burning a satisfying path down his throat. "Thank you," he said after a moment, "for everything. I couldn't have managed this without you." Kai shrugged, dismissing the gratitude. What are friends for, if not helping execute elaborately planned revenge scenarios? A ghost of a smile touched Julian's lips. "Not revenge," he corrected. "Protection. Of your assets, certainly," Kai acknowledged. "But let's not pretend tonight wasn't also about making her pay for what she did." Julian considered this, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "I wanted her to understand that actions have consequences, that I wasn't the pushover she thought I was." "Message received, I'd say," Kai observed dryly. She looked shell-shocked by the time I left the restaurant. "It will be worse now," Julian said, "when she realizes the full extent of the changes. No access to funds, no house to return to, no sympathetic ear among our friends." Kai studied him over the rim of his glass. "No second chances?" he asked, echoing the question Julian had anticipated. Julian shook his head decisively. "Not for people like her. Like her. People who betray trust deliberately, repeatedly, without remorse," Julian clarified. "People who view relationships as transactions, other people as tools to be used." Kai nodded slowly. "You know she'll try to retaliate. Not now, maybe not soon, but eventually, when she regroups." "I'm counting on it," Julian replied, surprising his friend. "The settlement has strict conditions. Any attempt at defamation, any legal challenge without substantial new evidence, any contact with me or my company all result in immediate forfeiture of funds." "You're setting her up to fail," Kai realized. "I'm setting appropriate boundaries with consequences she'll understand," Julian corrected. "Financial consequences." Kai sipped his drink thoughtfully. "Cold but effective. Still, she might surprise you. People backed into corners sometimes find unexpected resources." "I've accounted for every contingency I can reasonably anticipate," Julian said. "Beyond that, I'll deal with issues as they arise." They sat in companionable silence for a time, the quiet of the house broken only by the occasional clink of glass against surface as they sat down or picked up their drinks. "Have you thought about what comes next?" Kai asked finally. "After the divorce is finalized?" Julia hadn't, not really. The singular focus on ending his marriage had consumed his attention so completely that the future beyond that point remained unexamined. "Work," he said after a moment. "The company needs attention after my distraction these past weeks. The Singapore expansion is still in preliminary stages. That's it. Just back to business as usual." Julian understood Kai's concern. His friend was wondering if he would retreat into his work entirely, using it as a shield against processing what had happened. "For now," Julian conceded. "I need the structure, the familiar routine. Later, when things settle." He trailed off, unsure how to articulate what he couldn't yet envision. Kai nodded, not pressing further. "Just don't disappear into that office building. The company survived while you were planning this divorce. It can survive you taking some time for yourself." "Noted," Julian replied with a hint of dry humor. Though I'm not sure what time for myself looks like these days. That's part of what you figure out next, Kai pointed out. Who Julian is without Lily. What you want, now that you're free to want things just for yourself. The observation struck Julian as surprisingly profound, or perhaps the scotch was making him more receptive to philosophical musings. Either way, there was truth in Kai's words. He had been half of a couple for 5 years, making decisions within the context of shared life. Even as that life had grown increasingly false, it had still shaped his choices, his habits, his sense of identity. I bought the Walker property, Julian said suddenly, referring to a lakeside cabin they had driven past during a weekend trip years ago. Julian had admired its isolation and views. Lily had complained about its remoteness and lack of luxury amenities. Kai raised his eyebrows. The one 3 hours north? When did this happen? Last week. The closing is on Monday. Julian hadn't planned to tell anyone yet, but it felt significant, somehow his first major decision made solely for himself in years. Good, Kai said simply. It's a start. They finished their drinks in silence, the enormity of the day's events settling around them like dust after an explosion. Eventually, Kai stood, collecting the glasses and bottle. I should go. Early court appearance tomorrow. He paused, looking down at Julian with uncharacteristic solemnity. For what it's worth, you did the right thing. She would have destroyed you eventually financially, emotionally, completely. You protected yourself. Never apologize for that. Julian nodded, accepting both the assessment and the implicit absolution. He walked Kai to the door, the two men exchanging a brief but meaningful handshake before Kai departed. Alone again, Julian secured the house and returned to his office. He had one final task before he could consider this chapter truly closed. Opening his laptop, he navigated to his company's secure server and typed a brief email to his executive team. Effective immediately, all security protocols regarding Lillian Hanks are to be implemented. She is to be denied access to all company properties and personnel. Any attempts at contact should be documented and reported directly to me. This is non-negotiable and of the highest priority. That he sent a message, then composed a second, nearly identical one to his personal staff housekeeper's security team, personal assistant. Lily was to be excised not just from his home, but from every aspect of his life. The separation would be complete, clinical, without exception. With these final precautions in place, Julian closed his laptop and leaned back in his chair. Outside, the first hints of dawn were lightening the sky, marking the end of one day and the beginning of another. It seemed fitting somehow, the symbolic transition mirroring his own passage from one chapter of life to the next. He was under no illusions that this was truly the end of his entanglement with Lily. People rarely accepted defeat gracefully, especially those accustomed to getting their way through manipulation and deceit. She would make attempts to re-establish contact, to find leverage, to exact her own form of revenge. But Julian had removed her weapons, her resources, her points of access. Whatever she tried would be manageable, containable. For now, it was enough to know that he had freed himself from a relationship built on falsehood. He had reclaimed control of his life, his future, his sense of self. The pain of betrayal remained, a dull ache beneath the satisfaction of successful extraction, but even that would fade with time. Julian stood, moving to the window to watch the strengthening light of day. In his reflection, he saw a man changed by circumstance, but not broken by it. Harder, perhaps. More cautious, certainly. But also more aware of his own resilience, his capacity to recognize deception and respond decisively. He would not make the same mistakes again. Trust, when offered in the future, would be earned rather than freely given. Vulnerability would be measured, calculated, protected by stronger boundaries. The lesson had been costly, but thoroughly learned. Julian turned from the window, his decision made. He would shower, change, and head to the office earlier than usual. Work waited, plans needed attention. The forward momentum of purposeful action beckoned. Life continued, unburdened now by pretense and lies. As he moved through the quiet house, Julian felt something unexpected beneath the weariness and lingering anger, a tentative sense of possibility, of potential futures not yet defined but now fully his to shape. It wasn't happiness, not yet, but it was freedom, and for now, that was enough. Behind him, the rising sun cast long shadows across empty spaces once filled with false promises and hollow words. Julian did not look back. His path lay forward, into a future entirely his own, ruthless when necessary, unbroken by betrayal, and utterly, completely free.